Howdy neighbor, how is your garden growing? Me in my garden? Well, today I'm going to talk to you about the food and flowers that you could be growing in the month of March. So if you're looking for some ideas on vegetables, herbs, fruits, native flowers, and Florida friendlies, this is the video for you. And as always, I'm going to be using my handy dandy Wild Floridian garden planner. It's full of what to grow and when to grow, plus tons of space for you to plan out your garden, track your harvest, and the wildlife you see. And if you want to grab a copy right now, click the link right here. Let's talk vegetables. In the month of March, whether you live in North, Central, or South Florida, you should be thinking about growing hot weather crops. And if you're not familiar with things like hot weather crops, that's going to be things like Seminole pumpkins, roselle, okra, loofahs, yard long beans like Puerto Rican black beans, and of course, sweet potatoes. Now for my North Floridians, because you aren't warming up quite as fast as Central and South Florida, you still have a little bit of time to get your warm weather crops going. And warm weather crops are going to, of course, be things like tomatoes, peppers, corn, beans, and eggplants too. So let's dig a little bit deeper into what I would recommend you starting this month. And it's going to be peppers. Now you may be like, whoa, Jacqueline, you just said most of the state shouldn't be growing peppers, that they should be focused on those hot weather crops. And here's kind of one of the things about our peppers is that they can be kind of warm weather crops, or they could be hot weather crops depending on what type you get. Things like bell peppers are very clearly warm weather crops. They don't have a lot of that natural resistance to things like our heat, our humidity, the pest pressure. But there are a lot of types of peppers, the ones that have that strong capsaicin, that are actually native to Florida, the Caribbean, and all around the Gulf. These ones are hotter, or they have properties from hotter peppers that allow them to survive or actually thrive in the hottest times of year. So by getting these ones started by seed now, you are ensuring that you're going to have harvest in those warmer spring months and in the summertime. And one of my favorite peppers to recommend at this time of year is stuff like banana peppers and Cubanelle peppers. These are mild peppers. They are sweet peppers, and they're very similar to what you might expect from like a bell pepper. The biggest difference from them is one, the color, two, the fact that they're thin wall peppers versus thick wall peppers, and we'll get more into that in a second. And three, they actually do a lot better in our hotter times of year and could actually survive in Florida's heat. One, I love these ones for beginners if you haven't been into peppers, because typically if you go to those Home Depots, those Lowe's, those big box stores where they have the Bonnie peppers, they oftentimes carry these. So if you're not familiar with starting peppers, you can just go ahead and grab them off the shelf and then get them in your garden. Number two is your ability to handle spice can vary quite widely. So most people tend to enjoy a sweet pepper. Now the great thing I think about banana peppers is they can be used in a lot of different ways. One, they are crunchy and yummy and can be used fresh in salads and in tacos and burritos. You can add them to salsas. You can make pepper bean salad with them. You can pickle them. Once they're pickled, then you can go ahead and put them in pitas, which I love doing, is having pickled banana peppers with falafel and hummus. It's just very yummy. And what's also great about them is they definitely grow into the summertime. I had my banana peppers deep into the summer last year. Honestly, mostly I took them out just because I had way too many peppers at that point and I didn't need any more, and I just needed to open up space in the beds for my fall crop. Well, actually, maybe I should recommend peppers, because if I remember correctly last year, I was pretty annoyed by the peppers at the end of it because there was just so many peppers. And that brings me to one of my tips if you're going to do something like a banana pepper that you just pick up from the store, is that buyer beware, you might need a lot less than you think. They can be really, really productive in these warm to hot months here in Florida. So definitely be prepared for recipes for pickling, eating them fresh, eating chilies, eating them in stews. I mean, you're just gonna have so many. Now, if you can't find banana peppers and you see something like Cubanelle, it's very similar. I would say the biggest difference between sweet banana peppers and Cubanelles is the size. Banana peppers tend to be a little bit smaller, but not by much, than a Cubanelle pepper. But I have found both to be really productive. And I know with Cubanelle plants, I had Cubanelle pepper plants for over a year. They actually lasted for about 18 months before I ended up removing them in one of my front beds. But of course, let us all know in the comments what your experience has been, because I have heard some people even say that they've gotten Cubanelle peppers to last 7 years. And beyond things like banana peppers and Cubanelles, there's a whole bunch of other peppers that you could be adding to your garden. And I would love to hear from those who love to grow peppers. What are some of your favorite varieties to start at this time of year to last through those warm and hot months? But let's actually jump into my tip of the month, which is you should be starting some hot weather crops this month. Or if not starting them, at least getting your seeds for them. Because hot weather crops, well, they're kind of slow to get going, and then they really take off once it's hot. But the more we get them established with good root systems, the better they're gonna survive and thrive through the summertime. And now you might not be that familiar with a lot of these. I know a lot of you probably are familiar with sweet potatoes, but the rest of the list might feel very new. And some of the ones I would really consider trying out if you haven't tried them out before is one, Seminole pumpkins. If you like butternut squash, this is a great pumpkin to start with. One, a lot of debate goes back and forth on this one point, which is that they're native to Florida. But even if they're not native to Florida, they're native to the south of the United States, which means they grow so well here. You can have so many pumpkins. And I actually have a video that goes way in depth about these plants and answering all of your questions. And you can check that out with the Everything You Need to Know About Seminole Pumpkins video. Another hot weather crop that I kind of told you guys to hold off on is you should consider doing Everglades tomatoes. Another one that some people say is native to Florida, but again, even if it's not, it's native to the areas around Florida. And it's a tomato that actually does really, really well in these hotter times of year. So well that I bet there's a bunch of people who will comment that if they've already had Everglades tomatoes last year, they're probably starting to see them pop up around this time. I know between my house and Mr. Cliff's house, and actually into some of my other neighbors' yards, I'm seeing Everglades tomato plants pop up all over the place. You will never have to start seeds again. You just dig them up and relocate them. But some of the other ones that you really may want to consider trying is something like a cranberry hibiscus. This is something that you can use actually as an ornamental plant, but also you can eat the leaves. So if you're looking for kind of that like zesty lemony flavor in your salads, cranberry hibiscus can be a great one. And it can be perennial. So you can actually pick a spot outside your classic vegetable garden and put it in your yard. It can make gorgeous hibiscus flowers that are really cute. So just consider starting to explore some of those hot weather crops if you haven't grown them before, just so you can really have bountiful garden through the summer months. My next tip for you guys is to really pay attention to your brassicas. Remember, that's going to be things like broccolis, cauliflowers, cabbages, Brussels sprouts, and kale, not so much. But the other ones, really pay attention to them in the month of March, because as we rapidly heat up, what can often happen is we go from we're looking like we're ready to harvest to it's bolting. And that means it's gonna put out flowers. Once it puts out flowers, well, your harvest is pretty much done. And oftentimes I would say is if you're not sure what this looks like, it's better always to harvest on the early side rather than lose your total crop. Because you've put a lot of time and effort into these plants. And so if it's me, I'm harvesting on the early side rather than the late side. Which brings me to my next tip. Besides just harvesting early, in the month of March, watch out. I don't know, this is kind of like a warning, but like it can be a good thing too. March is the beginning of when the harvest really picks up. If you've been following along with all my tips and what to plant and when to plant it, March tends to be, for especially Central Florida and South Florida, when everything's ready. Or at least a lot of stuff's ready. It's the intersection of cold weather crops and hot weather crops. You have lettuces coming in, but also now tomatoes are starting to come in. My other tip is to have a system for when it gets in. For me, I end up having so much stuff come in all at once, and it'll just be weekend after weekend after weekend of food piling up. So be prepared to get ready to wash everything, cut it, freeze it, put it aside. Recipes are ready. Your jars are ready if you're gonna can, because it's coming. But in order to make it to those harvests, you're gonna need to continue to stay on your watering, because we're definitely in the drought month in March. We're definitely gonna see lower rain in general than what we're gonna see in the summertime. And so in order for your crops to finish, they need water. So do either get a rain gauge or have a way to monitor this month, because it can be the difference from stuff looking really good to all of a sudden not looking so cute. What other foods could you be growing this month? Well, of course, because we're heading into the warm/hot time of year, it is a great time to also get fruits started. And of course, I'm going to be recommending bananas, and also one to consider is things like mulberries. Mulberries, if you're not familiar with it, it is a tree that actually there is a native type for the state of Florida that makes berries that I would say look a lot like blackberries, and they kind of taste similar to a blackberry/raspberry. And sometimes things like mulberries and bananas you can pick up from Home Depots and Lowe's, but oftentimes you can find the best varieties for growing here in Florida at some of your local nurseries. So I do recommend that you go ahead and check those out to see what grows best in your areas / get the right varieties that grow really well here. Okay, let's talk herbs. In the month of March, there are a lot of herbs you can grow. And of course, when I'm talking about growing them, I'm saying, go ahead, pick up the transplants that you see at the store. So this can be everything from chives to oregano, of course, basil and parsley. You have options. And remember, herbs is one of the best return on investment crops. For me, I'm a big fan of doing basil because basil, well, I'm gonna have tomatoes coming in. So fresh tomatoes, fresh basil, and then of course, throw in some fresh mozzarella. Boom, we have a lovely caprese to eat. Let's talk flowers. In the month of March, if you're considering adding Florida-friendly flowers, consider adding things like begonias, petunias, pentas, sages, impatiens, and of course, gaillardias, aka blanket flowers. Blanket flower is one of those ones that used to be considered native, and it's a great one to add to your garden that really gives it the wildflower vibe. It's an annual plant that will definitely go to seed and come back the next year. I actually can see a whole bunch in my front yard that are popping up from the blanket flowers that I planted last year, which is one of the great things about wildflowers. And if you're thinking about getting into Florida natives, this is also a great month to add things like Stokes aster, seaside ageratum, aka beach mist flower, which is an endangered species to the state of Florida, specifically the Keys, but is often sold at native nurseries, dune sunflower, blue ocean morning glory, and of course, blue-eyed grass. Blue-eyed grass is an amazing flower to add to your garden. I love this native plant. It is very similar to those ornamental grasses that you see a lot of people plant along sidewalks or in front of their buildings, or as kind of the low growing plant in a flower bed. But one of the key differences with blue-eyed grass is that this time of year, from late February, March, even into early April, depending on where you live in the state, it puts out these gorgeous purple blue flowers. It tends to like full sun to some shade, and it likes it a little bit on the moisture side. When we actually see these out in the wild, you'll often see them kind of near drainage ditches or in low spots because they want to be able to access a little bit more moisture throughout the year. I really love these ones because when they put out those purple, blue, iris-like flowers, they just tend to like bob in the wind, and then they get like a whole cluster of them. And even when it's not blooming, it's just kind of like a nice looking grass. Now, while pollinators can get nectar from it, for me personally, versus a lot of the other native wildflowers in the garden, I wouldn't say this is like the best at attracting pollinators, but it doesn't hurt. But honestly, one of the biggest benefits that I find with blue-eyed grass is that it is a grass alternative. But when I say grass, I'm talking about ornamental grass alternative. This is definitely a shorter border plant alternative that is native, that's going to use less water and require less inputs from you in order for it to not only survive but thrive in our wonderful, wonderful weather. Which brings me to one of my tips that you may want to consider if you want to go a little bit wild, is for you to start exploring lawn alternatives. We are at that time of year where grass is going to bounce back, but then eventually it's going to look a little stressed out. And one of the things I know so many of you who've watched this channel is that you're interested in converting to a more eco-friendly lawn alternative. And I am a fan. There are so many options. And if you want to continue exploring that idea, everything from frog fruit to sunshine mimosa, water hyssop, brown savory, and some of my videos where I dive in a little bit deeper to kind of talk you through the pros, the cons, things to think about if you're considering doing a lawn alternative. And you can check out one of those videos right here. Now let's talk tips and some things you need to be thinking about for the month of March, specifically weeds. They're coming back. They're bouncing back strong. Your cold snaps are pretty much behind you, and the weeds are gonna be coming back, and they're gonna come back in force. They're gonna start to try to take over your flower beds, your vegetable beds. They're gonna, anywhere they can. And now is the time we really should get them under control, because once we hit summer, it becomes pretty much unmanageable if they've taken hold. In my garden, I have both invasive weeds and some native weeds, but remember, at the end of the day, a weed is a plant I don't want there, or there, or there. Which is why I think it's important for us Floridians to understand what's popping up in our yard. Is it invasive? Is it native? And even if it's a native, do I even want to keep it? And if you want to learn way more about weeds that you might find popping up in your yard, go ahead and check out this video right here. I go over like 30 different weeds you might be seeing pop up at this time of year. I'll help you identify them and consider, do you want to do anything about them? Or do you want to even relocate some of them? Because there's sometimes some really good ones that are popping up. I know for me, I have Pellitory floridana popping up, and it's one of those short-lived annual weeds that I actually don't mind because it's a host plant to the red admiral butterfly. And other host plants like corky stem will pop up in my garden, and I like to relocate them because I like that they feed the caterpillars and they bring the butterflies in, but I don't necessarily like the fact of where I find them. My next tip, well, this is pretty much it. This is the last month for Central and South Florida. Oh wow, there's literally a red admiral butterfly right there. Okay, this is pretty much it. This is gonna be my last month for Central and South Florida. I'm gonna recommend doing the big projects. After we hit March, I mean, if you wanna do it, great. You can do your raised garden beds. You can go ahead and put trellises in. You can do retaining walls and all that stuff. But honestly, as a general rule, I'm gonna say, let it go. Let it go. Try to figure out a simpler, smaller, easier way to do it so that you can make it through till the next round of cool months. So final call, if you want to get something big done, this is about it. And it's not just the heat and the humidity, which aren't those enough, but we're really rapidly hitting into some of the highest sun intensity. It's going to get really not fun to be outside in the middle of the day. So if you have those bigger projects, knock them out now, wrap them up, and get them done. My next tip is going to be add flowers to your garden. If you haven't added them yet, if you're waiting for it to warm up a little bit, this is the time of year. Add some blue ocean morning glory, add some tropical sages, or add some Florida friendly flowers. There are so many amazing flowers that can really add a lot of color and a lot of joy to your garden. I'm a big fan, and of course, if you can do a two for one, where it's not just a pretty flower, but it's also helping some of our wildlife, that's just gonna be amazing. And as a friendly reminder, remember in the Wild Floridian planner, we do have charts that help you know which plants are gonna attract butterflies, bees, birds, and hummingbirds. And I want some more hummingbirds in my yard. Why do I have to live on a peninsula? And if you haven't added it yet, remember your warm weather crops are starting to bloom at this time of year. So you really need to get some pollinators in. So having that pollinator garden that's gonna attract the bees to your garden is a must. So if you need some more ideas on what to plant, when to plant it, native plants that attract bees, go ahead and grab the Wild Floridian Garden Planner right here. And if you wanna even see more ideas and more tips for the month of March, go ahead and check out this video right here. Okay, I'll see you soon. Bye.